the angels in the Bible are not so holy. In Job chapter 4, verse 18, even in his servants, he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. And then again in Job chapter 15, God does not even trust the angels. Even the heavens are not absolutely pure in his sight. Whatever holiness the scriptures tend to attribute to angels, nonetheless remain free will agents. And like ourselves, like human beings, angels can choose to disobey God and actually fall into sin. This coincides, I think, with what both Jude and Peter describe in their respective letters. So in 2 Peter 2, verse 4, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but threw them down into Tartarus or Tartarus and delivered them to be kept in chains of darkness until judgment. And this is similar to what Jude 6 says. Angels did not keep their own domains, but abandoned their proper dwelling place. These angels God has kept in eternal restraints under darkness for the judgment of the great day. What Peter and Jude are talking about here is the event, probably, that takes us all the way back to the origin in Genesis 6, to the beginning of wickedness when it really ran rampant throughout the whole world. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. B'nai Elohim, which is the Hebrew for sons of God, and why that phrase is reserved, it seems, in the Old Testament for angels only, that is, non-human individuals. So we go back to the book of Job in chapters 1 and 2. The sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, or the Satan, came also among them. And then again in Job 38, talks about the morning stars that sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Psalm 29, verse 1, where it talks again about sons of God and the glory due to his name and so forth. And they also appear, this phrase also appears in Psalm 89, 6. I think most of scholarship nowadays would agree with this interpretation. We have the Net Bible, which is the New English Translation Bible commentary. The phrase B'nai Elohim occurs only here and in Psalm 89. They're also known as the Assembly of the Holy Ones and Council of the Holy Ones. The heavenly assembly, comprised of so-called angels and other supernatural beings, appears to be in view. For more information, Job chapter 5, chapter 15, Zechariah 14, where these supernatural beings are referred to as holy ones. So let's go back to Jude with this information. So in Jude verses 6 and 7, we read, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper dwelling place, these he has kept in eternal restraints under darkness for the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, since they in the same way as these angels indulged in sexual perversion and went after strange flesh, are exhibited as an example in undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. But the whole point of Jude and Peter, the moral of their story, is to give an example to us humans and say to us, this is what happens when you disobey God. Even angels who do not obey will perish in a very awful way. And there's an awful judgment coming upon them, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them. And the specific sin here is this sexual perversion. And note there the strange flesh phrase that is, I think, unique. And it's a very odd thing to say. And it is odd because what happened was odd. What happened was a transgression of creation where you had, if you will, one species, one type of being leaving their domain, as it says in verse 6, disobeying God and the proper order of creation, and cohabiting, in this case, through sexual perversion with another type of being, human beings, that is. Let's dig a little bit into the angels in prison. So where exactly are these angels. So again, they did not keep or guard their own rule. The Greek there Jude uses is a well-known word, arche or archi, principality or rulership, used by Paul in Colossians 2:15. So it sounds like they were designated a place by God. It's like maybe a policeman or a security guard, the state authority saying, okay, this is the place you will guard, you will keep. This is your rulership, this area only. Don't go beyond that line or don't cross the state line or something like that. But they did, and that's the great sin. So they left that dominion of theirs that was designated by God. Interesting background to this, we find in Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, where the Masoretic there says sons of Israel, but these sons of Israel are most likely the same group, sons of God, as translated by the Greek, which is also similar to what Daniel chapter 10 says in the Greek translation of Daniel. So this is the famous Song of Moses passage in Deuteronomy 32 in reference to this domain. What is Jude actually talking about here? What domain, what rulership, what area did they leave? Remember the days of old, consider the years long past, ask your father and he will tell you, your elders and they will inform you. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided the sons of men, he set the boundaries, maybe paraphrase that as dominions of the peoples, the borders perhaps, according to the number of the sons of God. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance. So I'm using here a version called Berean Study Bible, and you see that footnote there with the letter B on verse 8, and at the bottom it has DSS, the Dead Sea Scrolls. LXX, once again, is the Greek numeral for 70, believed to have been 70 rabbis who translated the Hebrew scriptures into Greek, known also as the Septuagint. So they're noting here that in these versions of your Old Testament Bible, it reads according to the number of the angels of God. And the Masoretic, the Hebrew text, has according to the number of the sons of Israel. So we're probably talking about the same reference to angels, that is also used in Genesis 6. So God at the beginning, the civilization of man, God seems to have set boundaries for all the nations of the world. And he did it according to an angelic also boundary. These are like protecting angels perhaps, or angels guarding those nations, that the nations themselves will not transgress the borders God set for the human nations. All right, so let's go back to Peter now. So Peter writes, 2 Peter 2, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but threw them down into Tartarus and delivered them to be kept in chains of darkness until judgment, and if he, that is God, did not spare the ancient world, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, when he brought a flood on the world of the ungodly, and if he, that is God, reduced the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes and condemned them to ruin, making them an example to those who were going to be ungodly. The same thing, isn't it, as what Jude is talking about? But here we have more information as we move into what happened to these sons of God, to these angels who disobeyed God in Genesis 6. So Jude tells us they're in darkness, but now here we have more information from Peter introducing the word Tartarus or Tartarus, which is a well-known Greco-Roman word used a lot by the ancient Greek writers like Homer. Iliad, I believe it appears, and it's tied to the story of the old Greek gods and other gods and all those mythical stories you've heard about probably as a child. The first thing to address is that Tartarus is not Hades. Now, Hades is another Greek word for the Hebrew Sheol, the graveyard, basically. It's the underworld of the dead, also known as Gehenna. So the lake of fire is down there in Sheol somewhere. And when judgment comes, when the parousia takes place, God will reveal this Gehenna, which is underground somewhere. So it's in Sheol. But Tartarus is not that. There's a lot of confusion because too many translations mistranslate that Greek word Tartarus as, quote, hell. And again, that's another mistranslation, the word hell, of Hades, by the way, or Gehenna. No, Tartarus is in Sheol, is down there underground, just like the lake of fire is hidden down there underground. But again, this is very important because it leads to a lot of confusions. This place, Tartarus, is reserved for fallen angels. Again, this is very important to note, and this adds to the confusion because people think that that's where humans will go to as well, where these fallen angels of Genesis 6 are in prison at the moment. And the references for that are Revelation 18:2, Revelation 20, verse 7. Also see the extra biblical books, like the first two books of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. It gives you the background there. Just for your information and for you to research further if you'd like, Tartarus is also known as the airy Tartarus, in the air somehow, the second heaven according to the second book of Enoch. And this approximates perhaps to Paul talking about the prince of the power of the air, we believe is Satan, in Ephesians 2:2, and the cosmocrator in Ephesians 6:12, which is the idea that bad angels, let's call them, they're not only under the ground, but they're also in the air, what we today would call the stratosphere or the heavens, just above what we call the sky, perhaps. We also read in the first letter of Peter in chapter 3, Peter talks about how Christ suffered for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. Peter obviously is talking about the resurrection of Christ in verse 18. But then he says something interesting. He basically says, Peter, that after Jesus was raised, was made alive in the spirit, he went and made a proclamation, what would we call it, a declaration, gave a speech, if you will, to the spirits in prison who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah during the construction of the ark. Now, you will note, I hope you have already, in all these references, it always connects, it seems, to the days of Noah, to the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. In other words, to Genesis 6, 7, 8, the sons of God of Genesis 6, that these now called spirits in prison are those sons of God. Now, this happened already when Jesus was raised, according to Peter. So Peter was given this information about Christ, and Jesus went down there after he's raised from the dead, made alive in the spirit, as Peter puts it, and proclaimed or told these spirits something while they're down there in prison. He told the sons of God of Genesis 6, perhaps, you did not succeed. God's plan has been victorious. I have prevailed. I'm victorious. And perhaps Jesus even said, your day is coming soon. Now, spirits in prison. So again, we go back to Jude 6 and 7. God has kept, they're guarded in a way, in perpetual chains, are unbreakable. And they actually will remain chained up perpetually. I think even when they're thrown in, they will be thrown in the lake of fire. They will be destroyed, chained. I think it's just emphatic of the fact that these fallen angels, sons of God, did something so wrong. They're so bad that they will never be taken out of those chains. If we compare that to today, if you see a criminal today and they're chained up, you see them in court. But this is an interesting image because when a prisoner is on death row and then they decide that criminal will die by execution by the state, they usually let them out of the chains, obviously to kill them, to either put them in the electric chair or whatever. But these beings will be chained up, and that's the way they will perish. They're under gloomy darkness. That is probably a reference to the underworld, that is Sheol, where Tartarus is. Not that Tartarus is Sheol, again. And they're reserved for the great day of judgment. And that's that great day of the Lord, which becomes the day of Christ. And that's in Joel 2, Acts 2. And you can compare the first two books of Enoch. And perhaps this is what Jesus told them when he went down there. You're here not to ever be let out. And actually, you're here until the great day of judgment. It's a horrible thought. Their end, like Sodom and Gomorrah. And remember, the scriptures say that the smoke of Sodom and Gomorrah rises up to this day. I think it's in Revelation. But obviously, that's a metaphorical way of saying their end will be forever. They will be destroyed. The word spirits usually means an angel or angels, not humans. I think in general, that's what the scriptures show. So you have throughout the Gospels, here the synoptics, Matthew and Luke, Jesus or the apostles are driving out spirits. They're not driving out human beings, they're driving out spirits. As you know, what we call demons are also called unclean spirits throughout the synoptic Gospels, in the book of Acts, Revelation. The spirits are subject to us, human beings, and that's the story in Luke chapter 10. I believe it's the apostles telling Jesus how impressed they are that even the spirits are subject to us, I think is the story there. God makes his angels, that is spirits or winds, in Hebrews 1 verse 7, the word there in the plural. There are deceiving spirits with demonic doctrines, according to Paul in 1 Timothy 4, verse 1. There's the seven spirits, which are holy spirits, not evil spirits of God, in Revelation 3, 4, and 5. I'm just showing you here that the word in the plural spirits is usually non-humans, angels. Spirits of demons in Revelation 16, verse 14. But there are some exceptions to the rule typical in life. Hebrews 12, verse 9. Now I'm using the New Living Translation. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? This paraphrase translation applies the word spirits to human beings. And I think that's right. Other translations might just say the Father of spirits. In 1 John 4, or commands us to test the spirits to see whether they are from God. Probably, most likely, a reference to other persons. We must test. It says, don't believe every spirit. 1 Corinthians 12, verse 10. Again, using, by the way, the NIV, New International Version. Paul talking about the gifts that the Spirit gives, God that is. To one is given miraculous powers, another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits. Might be a bit ambiguous, could go both ways here. So if anything, these three exceptions, either too ambiguous to say for sure it's referring to angels, or they're more likely, especially the Hebrews one, referring to human beings.